Any health-related information on the following show provides general information only. Content presented on any show by any host or guest should not be substituted for a doctor's advice. Always consult your physician before beginning any new diet, exercise, or treatment program.
Welcome to Accelerated Health with Sara Banta. I'm a busy wife, mom of 3, and an NANP certified supplement professional, but that's not all. I'm also the founder of the multi-award-winning Accelerated Health products, a brand offering innovative natural supplements to optimize your health. And this podcast is not just a source of information, it's a community for you. We're all here to learn, grow on our health journeys. And this podcast is the springboard to learning, and the free group coaching on Telegram is where we continue learning together. You can ask your questions. I post tips and tools to deepen your health and to keep you motivated. So here's what you can expect. New episodes every Monday and Wednesday with in-depth health discussions and amazing guests. And Fridays are hot topic issues to keep things interesting. And then we follow it up on the free health group coaching on Telegram, where all those questions are answered. You learn about each other. You hear other people's stories, their reviews, all of that fun stuff. And have you thought about detoxing? Well, I know it can be scary, but I've created over 10 unique, easy detox cleanses to help you reset your body while feeling great, including detoxing from oxalates, which we're talking about today. Super excited. So you can take the detox quiz. The link is on my website, SaraBantaHealth.com, to find out which one's right for you. And if you're not ready for a full detox, but you want to start with supplements, don't know where to start, just complete my health goals form on the website. It's the free supplement protocol, and I will personally put together a program for you. So just taking a few steps forward with your health literally will change your life, and I'm here to help you every step of the way. And I'm so excited. We've got Sally K. Norton back. You guys hear me talk about these healthy foods that disrupt everything, and oxalates are one of those big 4 that I talk about a lot. And there's no one that's more of an expert than Sally K. Norton. Hi, Sally. How are you today?
Hello. I'm wonderful. Great to be with you.
Yeah. I'm super excited because, over the last 10 years, even just 5 years, even the healthy people that could get away with anything, eating all the processed foods, 70% of the diet for the typical American is processed foods. They're seeing signs like insulin resistance or diabetes or brain fog, where they go to the doctor and the doctor says, clean up your diet, eat more vegetables, eat more fruits, and go work out and exercise. So then these people try to do the right thing, and then their symptoms might even get worse because of some of these healthy foods that are not so healthy for us. And it gets overwhelming, I understand, but that's why we're going to get into the weeds of it today, but then we're going to pull back out to make it easy for you all. And hopefully you get some answers. I know for me that I was drinking organic, fresh turmeric in every drink that I drank for pain relief and inflammation. And I was thinking I was doing my body good, and I had to pass kidney stones. I've had 3 babies. I'd rather have another baby than pass a kidney stone. So that's just a little story of where you think you're doing the right thing and you're not. So Sally, I would love to start with just your expertise. What's your background in this topic? And then get into what are oxalates?
Well, I've been interested in nutrition for prevention and well-being since I was really young. I just defined it at age 12 in 7th grade that would be a career move. You could go get a nutrition degree and help people not get sick. But I was real interested in not being sick by the time they took my tonsils out at age 5. So I've been interested in diet, nutrition. I've always loved food. I was the little kid who would eat pickled herring and yogurt and and skip ice cream. Like, I really liked food, all kinds of food, adventurous eater, gardener, all that by age 9. So I've been in the kind of eat for well-being, eat for pleasure world forever. I did go to Cornell for my nutrition degree and then went on and got a master's in public health at UNC Chapel Hill. I've worked in communities in the inner city, in poor rural communities. I've worked in academia. I worked in medical schools and headed up a big grant as administrative lead on a grant that was intended to bring broader thinking and a broader recognition and kind of vocabulary around lifestyle medicine and integrative medicine involving complementary services and complementary ideas like using herbs for medicinal purposes. So written a lot of grants, designed research, know all this stuff about health and healing, know all this stuff about nutrition, and I really wasn't healthy. And none of my colleagues could help me. The medical doctors I worked with, the other people interested in holistic healing, the providers in holistic healing, all the homeopaths and acupuncturists and chiropractors and massage therapists and you name it, it goes on and on. Give me a voodoo heal, anybody. Nobody knew what was wrong with me or how to help me with my various problems with like skin breakouts and severe fatigue. I developed headaches and back pain since I was 12, foot problems in college. I had to drop out. I wasn't in painkillers, had to use crutches and wheelchairs for years. And it just like, why would someone who's growing their own healthy organic vegetables and cooking from home, while in college, I cooked from home. While in college, I grew Swiss chard organically out my door. Like, I have been seriously interested in eating well, and it hasn't worked out well. So I'm one of those people like, okay, the more you eat well, the worse you feel. You're like, boy, got a lemon of a body. So it turned out that I wasn't paying attention to something I learned about in school. But in school, it was like these two little paragraphs written by two different people because medical textbooks are edited volumes. So each chapter is written by a different group of people. And then there's an editor that pulls it all together who hires who they want in their book and so on. So they're not reading each other's chapters and the editor isn't paying attention. This guy said, well, there's these 6 high oxalate foods here and these 12 over here, and none of them even overlap. And all I learned in college is that if you eat too much oxalate or tannins, which is another chemical in plants. So plants have all these other chemicals, many of which are like iffy. Some of them we think they're probably good some of the time, and we call them polyphenols and things like this. But oxalates are really unique in that it's a very small chemical, very easy to make in nature. And many plants make a lot of it, and they build not just this oxalic acid molecule, which is a 2-carbon little thing, into calcium oxalate crystals for self-defense and for all kinds of purposes. This thing gets into your food. It's in your food naturally. Like nature put it there. This is not something you spray on, not something like organic is better because it's not. No. This is nature. This is in the clouds and the funguses in the soil make it. The plants deliberately make it and need it. So you're eating it when you eat certain plant foods. It's real uneven, the distribution. Some plants have a lot more than others. The ones that are super high are completely inedible and considered poisonous. And you get that interface between is it food or is it poison with rhubarb, because the leaf of the rhubarb is so poisonous with oxalate and probably alkaloids and other chemicals too, because plants have many things in them that aren't safe to eat much of, versus the stalk, which seems to be low enough that we're getting away with rhubarb occasionally. But it used to be you just had like a rhubarb dessert a few times a year and it wasn't a big deal. So in school, we learn like don't eat oxalate because it grabs that calcium and it makes it hard to absorb it. And then you lose calcium from your food. And so don't eat oxalate or tannins like in the tea around mealtime. And if you have kidney problems, absolutely get on a low oxalate diet. So I always thought of the low oxalate diet or paying attention to oxalate in your food only mattered if you had kidney stones. Mm-hmm. That's still a thing. Now, if you have kidney stones like you had, that's kind of an end stage thing. I'm realizing now after really reading the literature. By the time you get kidney stones, you have a serious problem with too much of this poison that's been in your food that's now collecting in your body in tissues beyond the kidney.
Right. And I was like you. I always was interested in health. I was focused on the wrong things as we were growing up, right? Eating the wrong healthy foods. But at least I had the drive to do it, and it didn't make sense. And it's like, well, would we have been better just eating the standard American diet at the time? Probably. But you go back to the time of my life when I was doing green drinks every day. And those green drinks were full of these plant poisons, not just oxalates, but the other thing that is so interesting as you were talking, because before we started, I really sat back and thought everyone's issues have gotten so much worse in the last 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not that people are eating more plants and they're eating more oxalates, but their livers and their detox pathways are stacked with all of these other things that they can't metabolize the oxalates even as good as they did 10 years ago. So you're asking your body to do so much more. And the other thing that I've realized is there are so many people suffering from hypothyroidism, and that can be connected to oxalates, can be connected to low iodine, which I talk a lot about. But all of these little things stack up. And then you add in the stressors and, chronic stress, cortisol, all of the things, and the body's just like, I give up. But oxalates just make things that much worse. And the unfortunate part, it's the people that are actually trying to do the right thing. And so that's why it's so important for us to have this discussion on this podcast, because people listening care about their health that are listening, right? They're not the typical Joe going to McDonald's every day. So what are the foods that are the worst offenders that we absolutely should never touch? And then maybe we talk about some of the ones that, okay, once you clean yourself out, you can get away with maybe once in a while, or it obviously depends on your current state of health, where you could maybe not handle it now, but you can handle it in 6 months, that sort of thing. So let's talk through some of the oxalates.
Well, I want to make sure we get time to talk through the things you were just saying, because there's a lot of misperceptions, and some of the way you were describing that actually takes us down a road of misperceptions about detox and liver function and oxalates, and in the foods too. Absolutely never touch again. There's almost no high oxalate food that is an absolute no, never touch again.
That's the news.
Yeah, it's not like 100% perfection is necessary to become oxalate aware and reduce the toxic burden and the stress in your body. In fact, trying to get to zero of this chemical can have its own hazards that can be just as bad as if you're eating a lot of it. So too little or too much can ultimately be a problem in today's world, where our bodies are storing it. So this is a big problem, because it turns into these calcium oxalate crystals, not just as kidney stones, but stones in your thyroid gland. And it can also turn into these lipid crystals and start filling up your liver and damaging your liver function and damaging any tissue that it gets to. So the foods I would elect in the oxalate world, if you really wanted to really be well, that really are like a hard pass, get them out of your diet as much as possible and never run back again. If there were 3 of those, they would be on my list. It would be maybe 4 of them. Almonds, cashews, Swiss chard, and spinach, which I put in the same category. Mm-hmm. Almonds, cashews, chard, which includes beet greens. It's actually the same vegetable. Almonds, cashews, chard, beet greens, spinach. I consider that like one thing, because there are all these dark leafy greens. Those are the ones that get the credit for being dark and leafy. But there's other leafy greens that are very low in oxalates. So you only have to worry about those 3: chard, beet greens, and spinach. So those are the 3 top ones, and I would throw in bonus round peanuts, sweet potatoes, white potatoes. So we really want to stay away from them as much as possible. Well, it's really interesting because, hey, there's one you don't have to give up all the way, but you get it early in life, and you get a lot of it sometimes, depending on your family. But there's chocolate, the peanuts, and the potatoes. Mm-hmm. Beets and sweet potatoes show up in an infant's life very early on, right? Yes. That first birthday, they make you eat a cake, and half the time there's chocolate in that cake somewhere.
Yeah.
Right. That first pureed food is often pureed sweet potatoes or pureed beets. And nowadays it has pureed green stuff in it, often spinach. Nowadays it has things like quinoa, horribly high in oxalate. These foods are not healthy and pretty dangerous for children.
And unfortunately, that quinoa and some of the other grains are really high in a vegan diet, because they're trying to get their proteins. Right. Beets, athletes are using beet juice for nitric oxide. right? And not just beets, but it's the concentration of in the juice. And just same like with celery juicing and just juicing in general, you're getting the concentrated vegetables. God did not intend us to put our vegetables in juicers, right? Are you
Right. And some of these vegetables, did God intend us to eat vegetables we've invented? Since most of the produce department came about through plant breeding.
Interesting.
Corn, all the cabbage family vegetables, which includes turnips and cauliflower and broccoli, all that, that's all human invention. The big, fat, sweet, juicy fruits, most wild fruits are small, tough, and bitter. And they're not that sweet and juicy and gigantic. So most of the produce, the carrot, there was no such thing as the carrot. The wild carrot is tough and bitter and impossible to chew on and not tasty. It's nasty. That somehow, we don't actually know how, sometime before the 1500s, we came up with the carrot through breeding. People have been interacting with nature for many, many, many thousands of years. And we've had a lot of time to play with plants and learn and teach ourselves, invent agriculture and invent these new plant products that are safe enough to end up in a produce department. If you go in the wild, you rarely see a nice juicy carrot. You're not going to see like just this beautiful salad hanging out in the woods and stop on your hike to sit down for a wood salad, because those foods in the woods and in the wilds and the places I've been in, which are limited because I'm in the US, which is a limited stretch of, the Americas. Maybe in the tropics, they just coconuts and bananas fall on your head and you're happy. But again, even the banana is due to breeding, and they say that the banana itself is destined for extinction. It has a disease problem, and it's only one set of genetics. It's very unique, and it doesn't seem to be breedable. That's one thing we can't seem to save. That's the current science, as far as I know. So our understanding of plants being so safe and beneficial, and the God put the vegetables here for us to eat. Well, God gave us a nice planet and a good brain, and we've invented a lot of cool things. And some of the things we invent, we get in trouble with.
Exactly. And banana is supposed to be a superfood, but it's high histamine as well. And the histamines play with the oxalates. You mentioned in the beginning that the oxalates, that you learned in your medical textbooks, that the oxalates can attach to calcium. And the reason you don't want to have oxalates is because it'll absorb or take out the absorption of calcium from your body, which is just a whole nother side effect of eating oxalates. So not only are you forming these crystals that are going to get deposited in all the wrong places, but then the calcium is not going to the right places. Can you talk a little bit more about how that works and where those crystals find themselves?
Right. So oxalic acid is the parent compound of oxalates. We call them oxalates because that acid changes around and it bonds with things like calcium, magnesium, iron, copper, you name it. These positively charged metal ions, they're just an individual molecule with a charge on them. When oxalic acid is that individual molecule, it's got a charge, one or two negative charges that connects with these minerals. So in your food, it binds and prevents you from absorbing loose calcium. And calcium comes in these different forms. You want that ionic calcium with the charge on it, but the one with the charge on it will bind with oxalates. And so calcium is useful because it does, to some degree, 20 to 30% lower how much of the oxalic acid moves from your food into the bloodstream, from your stomach and your intestines. Now, when you're juicing, you mentioned juicing was sort of concentrating. What it's doing is actually liberating the oxalic acid in a watery solution so that the fiber and the other elements in plants don't hold it in. So now you have oxalic acid freely flowing in a watery solution, and that allows it to absorb very quickly from inside the gut into the blood. So it gets into the blood. We call it absorption. And the more you water it down, aka almond milk, lots of water, and a few almonds with all that liberated, pureed oxalic acid gets in real fast. Tea is another example of this high oxalic acid, soluble. We call that soluble when it's able to disassociate into the ions like that and float in the water. Gets very quickly into your body up in the stomach. The more soluble, the more dilute, the more quickly it gets in, the more it can move into your tissues and the more toxic it is. So in the old literature from 1823, they said the more dilute the oxalic acid, the more toxic it is. And that's why, because it can now It's not blocked by fiber. It's not blocked by its own concentration. It's more free to roam. And it goes from your stomach and upper small intestine, where there isn't a lot of bacteria, by the way, and your stomach shouldn't have that high, that low pH, high acid environment in the stomach. There's no degrading of oxalic acid in the stomach. The stomach is a potential entry point for oxalic acid, and it goes straight into the bloodstream. And now you have ionic oxalic acid interfering with the calcium in the blood potentially. At some point, it can bind with calcium in the blood. That can lower the ionic calcium in the blood, which is a problem for all the tissues, but most especially for the pacemaker of the heart, and can cause arrhythmias and things. So that's called hypocalcemia. It also is affecting the physiology of the white blood cells right away. And within 40 minutes of a spinach smoothie, you have inflamed, damaged immune cells that no longer respond well to infection. So the effects on the cell have to do with interfering with calcium again, causing immune suppression. So now you're more prone to infection because you're damaging your circulating white blood cells. The red blood cells don't like it either. It interferes with their ability to make energy. And if it slows down their ATP production enough, they can start having trouble moving sodium from the cell. They get swollen up with water because the salt draws that water in, and your red blood cells explode. So both white and red blood cells have a shortened lifespan if they're overly exposed to oxalic acid. And if you're eating a smoothie for breakfast and a peanut butter sandwich for lunch and a sweet potato at dinner, every 4 hours you're flooding your bloodstream, and it takes 24 hours for food to move from mouth to toilet, right? So you've got all this time potentially with oxalic acid coming into the body following a meal. So you can get overlapping waves coming into your vascular system, affecting not just the blood cells, but also the vascular walls as well. And where does that, everything you absorb from your stomach and intestines, where is that going? Straight into the liver. The liver has to use this glutathione to protect itself from the damaging effects of oxalate. And you get an increased inflammatory state in the liver, and the liver's ability to protect itself from other toxins is compromised. Mm-hmm. The liver can actually collect oxalate. I mean, if you're bombing it with peanut butter and potatoes and chocolate and spinach and turmeric and quinoa and beet greens and, meal after meal after meal, snack. I mean, people will snack between meals on almonds and these trail mixes too. So you nuts and chocolate are all day long, right? Yeah. Your poor liver. Now that blood goes through the liver puts out additional oxalate. So the liver does not metabolize oxalate whatsoever. Forget the idea of metabolizing oxalic acid. That is not what happens. The liver makes oxalic acid as part of what it does. So the liver adds to the more inflamed and damaged liver is, the more it makes more oxalate. So the blood that came from your stomach, when it leaves the liver a few minutes later, it has more oxalate than it did even when it left the stomach, because the liver's adding some layer. Now that oxalic acid is back into general circulation after it's left the liver, and it's heading 2 inches up into your heart. That's the next stop. So now you have this oxalate-rich blood in the heart. No wonder the pacemaker doesn't like it. It goes straight to the heart muscle. Like, the heart gets a very full dose, the fullest dose the body will ever see, because some of it will get stuck in the heart tissues, and eventually you get crystals potentially building up in heart tissue. Then the body pumps that blood from one side of the heart into the lungs to get oxygen, and the next pump pumps it back into the heart and the other side of the heart. So now you've hit your liver, you've hit your immune cells, you've hit your red blood cells, you've hit your vascular tissue, you've hit your heart and your lungs, and now oxalic acid from your spinach salad and so on is moving out through the whole body. And the blood system narrows down to these little tiny capillaries that are just like one cell, barely one cell fits through, the really tiny. That's the feeder stuff. High pressure, you push out the nutrients, the oxygen, and all the things the cell needs, including oxalic acid. So the cells do not need oxalic acid. It's a toxin, and maybe the lymph tissue picks it up. Some of it gets picked back up into the circulation and keeps going. But in the meantime, you get oxalate exposure all over your body, in your thyroid gland, all of your glands, your eyeballs, your teeth, your gums, your nasal cavities, your ears, your brain. It gets anywhere. There's not a tissue it can't get to.
Wow. Okay. I have so many questions. First of all, Here we are drinking our spinach smoothie, thinking that we're getting our iron and supporting our red blood cells and supporting our immune systems. It's doing the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It's mind-boggling. Okay, so why would, because I always think back to the body's smart. The body wants to survive. Why would the liver want to make more oxalates or oxalic acid?
Well, it's a breakdown product of the breakdown of connective tissue. That's the main source of it. So this amino acid called hydroxyproline can become oxalic acid. Now, the body has enzymes to try to make other things. And if it has enough vitamin B1, especially, it'll shunt the precursor to the oxalic acid. There's these sort of three toxic precursor molecules that can work their way over enzymatically to become oxalate through liver metabolism and maybe kidney metabolism, maybe the red blood. There's other tissues that maybe do this, but in the literature, we credit the liver for doing most of this creation of oxalic acid, but it's a pretty small amount. The liver has no enzymes to prevent oxalate from forming or to take oxalate and turn it back into something else. Once it's oxalic acid in the body, it's always oxalic acid. You don't metabolize it. But the liver, when it's dealing with the breakdown of your connective tissue, tries not to turn hydroxyproline into oxalate, but always a little bit does. And it's an amount that your kidneys and your body can tolerate. We're built, because it's part of the things you have to pee out. That's why it ends up in the kidneys, because your main way of getting rid of it is nothing to do with the liver. It has everything to do with your kidneys, which filter out these water-soluble molecules from your blood and concentrate them, and you pee them out. That's why we need to urinate. We need to clean our blood. So we're cleaning our blood every time we're urinating and releasing this chemicals, and oxalate is part of that. Oxalic acid, calcium oxalate, and so on are part of what's in the urine. So the body's producing something that's maybe 20 or 50% of the kidney's capacity. It doesn't seem to be a problem at that level. So with toxins, it's about the dose. If the liver were really sick and produces a lot, you would die from the oxalic poisoning. In fact, there is a very rare genetic disease called primary hyperoxaluria, which just means lots of oxalate in the urine because you've gotten something wrong with your genetics. Very rare, but it's very interesting in terms of understanding the effects of oxalate in the body and how deadly it can be.
It's amazing. And if people have been listening to me, they know you got to love on your liver, right? The liver is detoxing everything, the spike protein. And over the last 5 years, our livers have been even more bombarded. And what we're seeing is that the spike protein actually makes more oxalates in the body away from the oxalates we're eating. So the burden is even higher, which means we need to be even more vigilant about what we're putting in our mouth. Autoimmune conditions. Can you talk about some of the main autoimmune issues that oxalates contribute to?
Well, first off, oxalic acid and the calcium oxalate crystals, which you don't absorb. So the plants give you crystals, which are hard, like little bits of ground up glass, many of them in these little toothpick shapes. So that hard calcium oxalate's like quartz, it's grit in your food that's affecting your gut. So between the oxalic acid's effect on the cells and the gritty glass-like calcium oxalate crystals, you get intestinal damage, both physiologic damage that affects cell function, electromagnetic damage, which affects the structure of the membranes, causing the way the membrane is organized to get scrambled, and you get mechanical damage. So you end up with a certain type of inflammation that causes these tight junctions that hook all those cells together to be looser. So you get this sort of leaky gut. You get damage to other tissues in there that, it's a kind of complicated but really interesting tissue, the gut lining, because it's just one cell layer, but it's got lymph tissues, endocrine tissues, neurological tissues, immune tissues. So there's a major seat for the intersection of your immune system, your endocrine system, and your nervous system. Is all happening in the gut. And right there, the oxalic acid and the calcium oxalate grit is causing dysregulation of intestinal function, contributing to epithelial damage problems, and potentially sparking off in intestinal and extraintestinal, like not just in the intestines, but autoimmune disorders coming right there. And, you've got also, there's so many ways this is messing things up. It's almost hard to think about, okay, the crystals do this, the acid does this, then crystals start sticking and acid starts affecting cell metabolism and the mitochondria go wrong. And it turns on a kind of oxidative stress that turns on inflammation. And you get this repeat call, hey, cells damaged over here. See all these leaky products. Immune system comes over and over and over to try to fix the problem. So it's self-defense. In self-defense against all this damage, the immune system is dutifully coming over there. And it has to call all its friends. It puts out all these cytokines and all these molecules that says, over here, guys, big problem over here. So you got all these heroes. You can think of the immune cells as like first responders. All the first responders, the ambulance drivers, everybody's coming to the scene of the crime, and they're putting out more and more alarms. You got more coming in from other states, other counties. And you get turning this on over and over again with meals or with this deposition that starts creating these crystals. Now you get these little tumors of cells forming around the crystals, and that starts to bury them, and the body starts what we call sequestration, which is holding on to them and insulating them. So you don't actually know what's going on. The body's like bravely doing this all under the hood, and you don't even notice. You're like, great smoothie. I feel great, man. And you jump in the pool because you're having a great day. In the meantime, underneath the hood, there's a big emergency going on.
So let me stop you real quick. So in that case, the oxalates aren't even trying to get out of the body through the urinary tract. They're hidden in the tissues, and the body's holding on to them.
Yeah, so it might not show up in a urine test.
Wow.
Especially the more the kidneys get damaged, the harder it is for them to pee it out. And the kidneys start to become a magnet that's holding onto it because the crystals tend to encourage more crystal formation. And the more you have tissue damage, the less the tissues can defend themselves. So really, really healthy tissues repel oxalate as much as they can, repel the crystals as much as they can. But the minute you have a tissue where the cells are used up or dying, now cells come and go every day. That's the nature of life. New cells young, it gets old, it's replaced. But as tissues die or are damaged, you bruise yourself, you use your tissues all day long, there's debris, cellular debris, and that tissue doesn't defend itself, and that's where it starts forming, and then the immune system comes in and kind of packages it so it doesn't cause additional damage to the new cells that are trying to form there. But the more the tissue is trying to regenerate and trying to heal, the stickier it is to oxalate, and you're more likely to get oxalate being picked up and held in tissues that are damaged. So if you had frostbite, broken this or that, use a tissue a lot, those tissues tend to be areas where oxalate collects.
So one autoimmune issue is Hashimoto's and thyroid issues. And I believe 9 out of 10 people are walking around with suboptimal thyroid and don't know it because their doctors are not doing a full panel. They're just testing TSH and T4. So they don't know that they are suffering except for their hair's falling out. Their weight is just coming on out of nowhere. They're fatigued, they're depressed, all of these other symptoms, and they're not connecting the dots because the doctor says you're normal. So how do oxalates play with the thyroid, which is the master endocrine gland and affects your sex hormones and affects your adrenals and everything else?
Glands have a real affinity for oxalates. My theory is that glands are factories. They have to produce thyroid molecules, or they have to produce other enzymes or hormones, right? They're producing substances, even sebum or other kind of oils for your skin. Like glands are all over the body, but these endocrine glands that help regulate your metabolism are sensitive to picking up oxalate. And it turns out, really surprising that we haven't done more serious literature and research and put some real dollars into this, because the few studies that are out there looking at trying to see the oxalates in the tissue itself of our thyroid glands shows that by the time you're middle-aged, you have an 85% chance of having little tiny kidney stones, basically, of calcium oxalate collecting in your thyroid gland, interfering with function. And the more your function goes down, the more likely you are to collect it. So once you start collecting it, it gets worse with age because, of course, it's interfering with function, and therefore those cells aren't defending themselves that well and preventing the accumulation. So, yeah, I think thyroid problems are becoming just like gut problems and mood problems, energy problems, bone health problems, arthritis, pain syndromes. These things are not going away. We're getting them at younger ages. I mean, young girls are getting kidney stones now. Digestive problems, mood problems. We have a pain epidemic and we have a drug addiction epidemic because people are taking drugs to cope with their mood problems or their physical pain, and usually come together. If you're in a lot of physical pain, you're likely to struggle with inflammation that causes mood problems. Well, why are we all getting sicker? We are eating awful, but we're also collecting oxalate from foods we trust, like the peanut butter and the potatoes that are just part of every day for a lot of people.
Yeah, and like I mentioned, the spike protein has changed things. So it disrupts the oxalate metabolism, it worsens the histamine response. It
Right.
also is affecting our sulfur detox pathways. So here we eat the cruciferous vegetables and our turmeric with our spinach and our bananas and our bone broth that are high histamine. And it's like this pile up of these healthy foods that are causing inflammation, gut issues, thyroid issues, brain fog, depression, anxiety, and this is all on top of the stress that we're feeling from the chaotic world we're living in. It's just,
It adds up. If one thing is turning on inflammation, and then you have something else that's turning on inflammation, something else turning on inflammation, you're just stuck in loops of the inflammation comes on. It's supposed to be very short and be able to turn off. But you have so many things turning it back on again. And with oxalate, you get nanoparticles collecting in all your important tissues, like your shoulder joint and your neck joints and your low back, your kneecap, all over the body. These particulate nano and microcrystals that are forming are potentially turning on inflammation. And there's a certain kind of genetic subtype. If you tend to have allergies in your family, you're headed toward autoimmune related symptoms with high oxalate and with any infection and this sort of toxicity situation that keeps the liver inflamed. If you're constantly doing, nail polish and all the stuff we do all day long, that's so toxic. The liver is being asked to work too hard. That turns on the immune system having to work too hard under horrible work conditions, right? Because you end up with nutrient deficiencies, especially in the minerals. Oxalate causes you to lose not just calcium, but pretty much all the minerals because the inflammation makes the cells leaky. And you end up with problems with not enough Bs, and the liver needs more Bs to keep everything going. And of course, a lot of people aren't eating the right kind of fats either. And that's another nutrient that you need for healthy brain, healthy nerves as well.
so let's talk about that. What diet do you recommend for people to get all the nutrients they're needing, but then also you don't want to take all of the oxalates out 100%, going from 1,000 to 0, right? Because
Right.
then you have the oxalate dumping. So what do you recommend?
Well, you have to see where a person is and what they're eating now. If they're living on, junk food and caffeine and candy and so on, you really do have to deal with like blood sugar, not be living on sugar all the time. It really depends on where you are. If you're in the health nut column, which a lot of our listeners are going to be, well, I don't know everything about what's the right thing to eat. And they're like doing the turmeric and doing their herba mate, and they're doing their spinach smoothies and their spinach salad and their special version of whatever healthy French fries at home with sweet potatoes or whatever. It's like, if you're into the quinoa and the gluten-free and the dairy-free, you're probably eating too much oxalate. And you really should start with the oxalate and get in a sense of what food you're eating. Are you eating the chia bowls? Out. Almond milk? Out. Almond flour? Out. And spinach smoothies, get rid of the spinach. You can still have a smoothie, use lettuce or something else, but you don't want to be living on these high oxalate foods. So figure out like your top high oxalate things that you use a lot. Start knocking them off one by one and make sure you get enough protein. Most people are so afraid of meat and cheese and eggs, which are the source of proteins, in fish. People are not so afraid of fish, but of course there's microplastics in fish, and there's mercury in fish, and there's this and that, because of course we have poisoned our environment. And we seem to take little concern for that when we choose plastic containers when we don't need to. It's hopefully we're in an era where we're going to start saying, you know what, probably we shouldn't keep polluting the oceans and polluting our food source and have cleaner soil. And like, we should care about those things. That'd be good. The future needs us to care. So, you've got to think, how do I get by without chia bowls? Well, what kind of protein foods, what kind of, some nice locally raised eggs would be great. Some good yogurt might be nice, some kefir, some leftover meat, something with protein in it. If you can make protein a centerpiece of a meal, but not live on pure protein, you still need some good fat in order to process that well. You probably need some carbohydrates. I don't think a long-term keto zero carb diet is safe. It's very tough on the adrenal glands, tough on the liver, making the liver work so hard again and keep your blood sugar even. And your thyroid gland has to work well to handle all that. You can probably notice that if you get enough carbs, you sleep better, you don't have restless legs at night, and so on. So it's not about, the fact that we're metabolically damaged now and can't handle our carbs well, and we're eating carbs all day long and eating sugary junk and drinking sugar. That's an obvious problem, but it doesn't mean you can't have fruits and vegetables with carbs in them. You can't have white rice is a good food because you need some energy. Part of the point of eating is to get calories. Mitochondria need calories to run, to produce the ATP to keep everything going. If you're in a brownout because you can't digest your food and you're not eating enough carbs and fat, and you're trying to live on, I don't know, protein powders, which don't have any whole, they're not a whole food anymore. You've so isolated. That's a highly processed food. Living on protein powders and little protein snack bars full of peanuts and whatever, and these convenience foods, basically it's like walking around slurping soft food like for the infirm and chewing on candy bars that are disguised as health food. Getting back to actual food and knowing what a pot is and a peeler or a knife, like these are good things. It's the part of the richness of life is to sit down and actually take a knife and fork and eat and not have to just slurp things down while you're going from errand to errand. So there's a bigger conversation about how food is important, how we should protect food, to have good, clean, wholesome food and get back to foods that we've always eaten and stop demonizing the basic foods that have always been on our plates, things like sour cream and butter and eggs and meats. These are appropriate to the human species and always have been until we turned over food production to big corporations who need to make money. And we've turned over food preparation to restaurants who need to make money. So they will cheapen the ingredients and get you used to cheap ingredients so that you can have your convenience, but there's a lot that we're giving away that we need to retain.
I just heard that the two largest tobacco companies bought the biggest food companies. So we just switched from big tobacco to big food, and they have hijacked our food system. And I preach what you're saying every day. Let's just get back to food, real food. And I was talking to Katie Wells about the fact that get in the kitchen with your young children. Spend that time teaching them how to turn the pot on the stove. They're not going to throw away their lunch when they get invested themselves in cooking their food and taking it to school. And I now am a mom of adult children. Do you think I cook them breakfast and lunch anymore? No, because I taught them in kindergarten. So my job is super easy now. The more time and love and effort you put in the kitchen when they're young, the less you have to do later on. And what a gift you're giving them to really understand the value of real food and not the convenience.
Inherently understanding what food is and how to be in the kitchen. Like it's just part of who you are if you grow up with it. It's so easy. I think my mom was working 3 days a week at some point when I was still in elementary school, probably third grade. And she wanted me to put these TV dinners in the oven for dinner. And I already knew by third grade that just wasn't enough green stuff and vegetables. So I wanted to cook a can of peas too. And I remember watching her drain the peas to serve them. So I put the can of peas in the pot, but I drained them first and they burnt because there's no water in there. Like that was, I learned by doing as probably a third grader because I wanted to make a nutritious dinner. My mom assigned me to stick them in the oven. I'm like, I can do more than that. And I can make a better meal for the family. Like I already knew a little bit about nutrition and had a sense of cooking. It was probably even second grade. It was pretty young. But just to be around food and expecting dinner to happen at home and some preparation involves some pre-thought, like I learned in the morning or the day before, that would be my job. Like just thinking ahead, you will want dinner tomorrow. So it's not a surprise. People are like, well, I didn't have time. I didn't think about it. So there's lots to it. Like growing around food and having food production in the home around children is part of the beauty of growing up at home. That's home life. Right?
Exactly. And we're trying to have these convenient foods, which have then forced us to go, okay, unexplained weight gain, unexplained chronic disease. I'm going to just eliminate carbs, or I'm just going to eliminate fat. And that's not what it's about. It's about eating the whole, good, right food. And something that you touched on was like the almond milks and the oat milks and all of these milks that aren't real milk. We think we're doing a service to our body, and they're actually backfiring not only of the oxalates, but they have all of these other fake ingredients in there to make it look and feel and taste like milk.
Where gums and things that are really rough on your digestive tract.
Yeah.
So people are often taking it because they think they can't digest milk, but they're taking in things that will probably just perpetuate this tendency to at least a low-grade inflammation in the gut. Yeah. And it's marketing, it's convenience, it's popularity, it's general acceptance. If everyone says it's good and we keep hearing that it's good, we just kind of living in the sea of this culture around food, but ultimately it's quite toxic, right? It's slowly eroding our health and well-being.
And when I came to find out what oxalates were doing to my body, they were in my favorite foods. But as soon as I could feel the energy come back, the inflammation go away, it's like, I don't care what I'm eating. I have this energy that I haven't experienced in years, and I will eat whatever my body's asking for, because to feel good, the whole goal of when you're eating is to get energy. But if that food is not transferring into energy, what good is it doing? When you start feeling good, you'll say, okay, I don't ever need to eat that food again. I will eat these foods. And as we're talking, it might sound overwhelming, but with Sally's book, and I talk a lot about oxalates as well and list them out, there's plenty of food out there that are safe to eat, that feed your body what it needs. You won't feel deprived, especially when you're eating real food and you stay away from the big food. Sally, before we go, because I can't believe we're out of time already, anything we're missing, any big points that you want to leave the listeners with?
Right. Well, there's a lot of misunderstanding about oxalate, and a lot of people who will tell you different things than what we're talking about. And that's coming out of wishful thinking and a lack of real knowing what's there in the literature. I spent years digging up so much literature and tried to simplify it down. I only put 600 references in Toxic Superfoods, which tries to describe that soup to nuts. And you don't have to know all those things. But people ask, like, well, are plants good for you? And what's, and try to explain all these questions that come up in that book so that you've got that for yourself. And just be willing to go out on a limb and learn something that isn't popular yet, because prevention is the key. People that I work with are so terribly sick from having accumulated oxalate for decades and decades and had no idea that's what they were doing to themselves. It's taking us a decade or more to get back to semi-normal. Now you can feel much better very quickly, as you did, but you still have this background burden where oxalate has still poisoned your tissues, your bones, your bone marrow, your thyroid gland, like your brain. Like, why would you wait to be sick? This is the most important call for prevention. I've always been into prevention, but for those of us who've really pushed it to the point where we're quite sick and broken, and I'm from a family that has allergies, so I'm really prone to this, I think. We are asking you to please take our bleeding and suffering and pain and the things that have done to our lives to take away the quality that we could have had. Please take this seriously. Taking time to be educated about this could be the best thing you ever did for your family.
Yeah, because it's not just you, it's about your children and the next generations and the loved ones around you. Sally, where can people find your book, and where can people find you?
I'm at sallyknorton.com, And you can find on SaraBanta.com, there's a couple things you can only get there, including my data companion that has a lot of details. Some people find that the intro to this and the data itself is an adequate thing. But if you want the full story, get Toxic Superfoods, which is sold anywhere books are sold. You can get audiobook, ebook, and paperback book. You can also get a cookbook off my website, and there's going to be a print on demand of that coming up soon on my website. And so if you need to reach out to me, do it through my website. I'm also on Instagram. Please look for my YouTube channel. There's several stories, testimonials there. People saying how this was so bad and the simple change in their diet completely revived their lives. Really inspiring stuff there too.
Amazing. Well, I definitely consider you the top guru on oxalates, and oxalates are something I talk about a lot because people that are listening, like I said, they're the ones that are trying to do the right thing, and it might be backfiring. So thank you for all of your work and everything you're doing. And everyone else, thank you for joining us today. Gosh, if you're overwhelmed, definitely leave a comment below. Join the free group coaching, ask your questions. I have put together the accelerated food guide that talks about oxalates, sulfur, amyloids, these other poisons that you think are healthy that could be disrupting your liver, disrupting your thyroid. And, you got to love that liver. And we've just introduced the accelerated liver care that really helps with that inflammation, hepatitis, a whole bunch of other things. It's scalar enhanced, unlike any other liver supplement. So that is there to help support you as you're on this journey on trying to figure out which foods are the right foods to be eating. So thanks for listening. Our discussion does not have to stop here. Join me in the free group coaching. Email me through the website, fill out the supplement protocol. I will put together a personalized protocol just for you. Follow me on social media at Accelerated Health Products. And you can listen to this podcast, Accelerated Health with Sara Banta, anywhere on Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio, over 100 different platforms. And you can use coupon podcast10 at acceleratedhealthproducts.com to try anything new out. I'm live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so join me next time for more ways to unlock your potential.